I am Harold Brennan, 67 years old, and for the past 4 months, I have been pretending to be a fool. Last Saturday night, I hosted a dinner to celebrate what would have been my 50th wedding anniversary with my late wife, Margaret. 200 guests, a ballroom at the Palmer House in Chicago, and my son-in-law, Derek, sitting 3 seats away from me, carefully stirring something into my bourbon when he thought no one was looking. He smiled at me across the table, that same confident, charming smile that had won my daughter's heart 6 years ago. I smiled back. What he didn't know was that I had been watching him for months. What he didn't know was that the glass he had just poisoned was not the one I was going to drink. Before I tell you what happened when his own brother took that drink instead, I want to know where you're listening from tonight. Drop your city in the comments. And please, hit subscribe if you believe that underestimating an old man is one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make. The ballroom was beautiful. Margaret would have loved it. Crystal chandeliers, white roses on every table, a string quartet playing the same song we had danced to at our wedding in 1975. I had spent nearly $80,000 on this party, and I hated every second of it. Not because of the money, I had plenty of that, but because this party was not a celebration. It was a trap. I stood at the head table, looking out at the crowd. Old friends from the construction business, former employees of Brennan & Sons, the company I had built from a single truck and a dream into one of the largest commercial contractors in the Midwest. City councilmen, architects. Even the mayor's deputy was there, nursing a martini and laughing too loudly at something my accountant said. And then there was my family table. My daughter, Melissa, was sitting next to her husband, Derek. She was wearing a blue dress that Margaret had picked out for her years ago, before she got sick. Melissa looked tired. She always looked tired these days. The spark that used to light up her eyes was gone, replaced by something hollow, something anxious. She kept glancing at Derek, waiting for his approval before she spoke, before she laughed, before she did anything at all. Derek was holding court, as usual. He was a handsome man, I'll give him that. 42 years old, silver at the temples, a jaw that belonged on a movie poster. He was a financial advisor, he said. He managed money for high-net-worth individuals. He wore watches that cost more than my first house. Sitting next to Derek was his brother, Craig. Craig was a lawyer. Corporate stuff, he claimed. He was quieter than Derek, but his eyes were always moving, always calculating. The two of them together reminded me of wolves circling a wounded deer. And tonight, I was the deer. I tapped the microphone. The feedback squeal cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at me. "Friends," I said, my voice steady, "thank you for coming. I know Margaret is watching tonight, probably complaining that I spent too much on the flowers." A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. 50 years, I continued. 50 years since that stubborn, beautiful woman agreed to marry a kid with dirt under his fingernails and a pickup truck held together with duct tape. She believed in me when no one else did. She built this life with me, brick by brick. I paused. I looked at Melissa. She was crying softly, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Derek had his hand on her shoulder, but he was not looking at her. He was looking at me. His smile was perfect. His eyes were cold. "And now," I said, "I am blessed to be surrounded by the people she loved most. My daughter, my family, my friends." I raised my glass. "To Margaret." The room echoed the toast. "To Margaret." I watched Derek. He raised his glass, took a sip, and then set it down. His eyes flicked to the glass in front of me, the one he had doctored. He was waiting. I excused myself from the head table, claiming I needed to greet some old colleagues. As I moved through the crowd, shaking hands and accepting condolences and congratulations, I kept Derek in my peripheral vision. He was relaxed now, confident. He thought the hard part was over. He had no idea. I made my way back to the table from a different angle, approaching from behind Derek and Craig. I was an old man. I moved slowly. Nobody paid attention to old men at parties. That was their first mistake. As I passed behind the brothers, I stumbled. Just a small stumble, the kind of thing you expect from a 67-year-old man who has had a long night. I caught myself on the back of Craig's chair, and in that moment, My hand swept across the table. The switch took less than 2 seconds. I straightened up, patting Craig on the shoulder. "Sorry about that," I said, my voice a little shaky. "These old legs aren't what they used to be." Craig just nodded, barely acknowledging me. He reached for his glass, the glass that had been sitting in front of me moments before, and took a long drink. I sat back down in my seat. The glass in front of me now was clean, untouched, safe. I raised it to my lips and pretended to drink. Across the table, Derek was watching me with barely concealed anticipation. He was waiting for something, a stumble, a slurred word, a sign that the drug was taking effect. I gave him nothing. His smile began to falter. And then, beside him, Craig made a strange sound. It started as a cough. Then Craig's hand went to his throat. His face, which had been ruddy from the wine, suddenly drained of all color. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He grabbed the edge of the table, sending glasses and silverware crashing to the floor. "Craig!" Derek shouted, jumping to his feet. "Craig! What's wrong?" But Craig could not answer. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he collapsed onto the floor, his body jerking in violent spasms. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Someone screamed. A waiter dropped a tray. People rushed forward, forming a circle around Craig's convulsing body. "Call 911, someone yelled. "Give him space. Is there a doctor here?" I did not move. I just sat in my chair, watching. And then I looked at Derek. He was not looking at his brother. He was staring at me. His face was white. His hands were shaking. And in his eyes, I saw something I had been waiting 4 months to see. Fear. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics worked on Craig right there on the ballroom floor, stabilizing him before loading him onto a stretcher. The party was over. Guests were ushered out by hotel security. The beautiful white roses were trampled underfoot. I rode in my own car to the hospital. Ben Holloway, my attorney, and the only person I trusted completely, was behind the wheel. "It worked," I said quietly. Ben nodded. He did not smile. There was nothing to smile about. We had just watched a man nearly die. But that man had been coming for me. And now, finally, I had proof. The emergency room at Northwestern Memorial was a harsh contrast to the elegance of the Palmer house. Fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant, the constant beeping of monitors. Derek was pacing in the waiting area. Melissa was sitting in a plastic chair, her face buried in her hands. She was sobbing. I walked over to her and put my hand on her shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, looking up at me. "What happened?" "Craig just collapsed. He was fine 1 minute, and then he just—" "I know, sweetheart," I said, "I know." Derek stopped pacing. He looked at me with those cold, calculating eyes. "You were sitting right there," he said. His voice was tight, controlled. "Did you see anything? Did Craig eat something strange? Drink something?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know, Derek. I'm an old man. I don't notice much these days." He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the gears turning in his head. He was trying to figure out what had gone wrong. He had put the drug in my glass. He had watched me drink from it. So why was I standing here, perfectly lucid, while his brother was fighting for his life? The answer, of course, was that he had not watched me drink from it. He had watched me raise it to my lips. He had assumed the rest. Never assume anything about a man who has spent 40 years building a business in Chicago. A doctor emerged from the treatment area. She was young, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a clipboard. "Family for Craig Mercer?" We all stood up. "He's stable," the doctor said. "We pumped his stomach and got most of it out of his system. But I need to tell you what we found." She looked at each of us in turn. His blood work came back positive for a significant dose of flunitrazepam. That's Rohypnol, the date rape drug. In the amount we found, it would cause severe disorientation, memory loss, and in some cases, seizures, like the one Mr. Mercer experienced. Melissa gasped. "Someone drugged him? At the party? Who would do that?" The doctor's expression was grim. "That's not for me to determine. But I am required by law to report this to the police. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate poisoning." Derek's face was a mask, but I could see the sweat forming on his forehead. I could see the slight tremor in his hands. "The police," he said slowly. "Of course, we'll cooperate fully." I said nothing. I just watched him. And I waited. The police arrived within the hour. 2 detectives, a man and a woman, both with the weary expressions of people who had seen too much. They interviewed each of us separately in a small consultation room. When it was Derek's turn, I watched him walk through the door with that confident stride, that charming smile already in place. He was in there for 45 minutes. When he came out, the smile was gone. The detectives asked to speak with me next. I sat down across from them, folded my hands on the table, and waited. "Mr. Brennan," the female detective said. Her name was Rodriguez. "Can you tell us what you observed at the party tonight?" I sighed, rubbing my eyes like a tired old man. "Not much, I'm afraid. My memory isn't what it used to be. I was greeting guests, making small talk. Craig was at the table when I came back. A few minutes later, he collapsed." "Did you see anyone near his drink?" I shook my head. "I'm sorry, detective. I just don't remember." Rodriguez studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We may have more questions later." "Of course," I said. "Anything to help." I walked out of that room and found Derek standing in the hallway, watching me. "Rough night," I said mildly. He did not respond. He just stared at me with those cold eyes, and I could see him trying to figure it out, trying to understand how his perfect plan had gone so wrong. I patted him on the shoulder as I walked past. "Get some rest, son. You look like you've seen a ghost." I did not go home that night. Ben had booked me a suite at the Four Seasons, far from my house, far from Derek and Melissa. I sat in the dark, looking out at the lights of the city, and I thought about how I had gotten here. It started 8 months ago, right after I sold Brennan and Sons. 40 years of my life, sold to a national construction conglomerate for $38 million. I was not sad to see it go. I was tired. Margaret had been gone for 2 years, and without her, the work felt empty. I wanted to rest. I wanted to travel. I wanted to spend time with Melissa and whatever grandchildren might eventually come. But then the questions started. Derek was the first to bring it up. We were at dinner, just the 3 of us, a month after the sale closed. "Harold," he said, using my first name the way he always did, as if we were equals. "I've been thinking about your portfolio. $38 million is a lot of money to just let sit in a bank account. You need active management. Strategic investment." I smiled politely. "I appreciate the concern, Derek, but I have my own people." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Your people are old school, Harold. They don't understand modern markets. I manage portfolios for clients with twice your net worth. Let me show you what I can do." I declined, politely but firmly. The following week, Melissa called me. She sounded nervous, rehearsed. "Dad," she said, "Derek and I have been talking. We're worried about you. You're getting older, and managing all that money on your own, it's a lot of stress. Maybe you should let Derek help. He really knows what he's doing." I told her I would think about it. I did not think about it. I called my attorney instead. "Ben," I said, "something is wrong. I need you to look into my son-in-law." Ben Holloway had been my lawyer for 20 years. He was a careful man, a thorough man. He did not ask questions. He just got to work. 2 weeks later, he came to my house with a thin manila folder. "You were right to be suspicious," he said, spreading documents across my kitchen table. "Derek Mercer is not a financial advisor. I mean, he has the license, but he hasn't had a legitimate client in 3 years. Then what does he do?" Ben pulled out a bank statement. "He runs what appears to be a Ponzi scheme, small scale, but growing. He takes money from new investors and uses it to pay returns to old investors. Classic pyramid structure. He's also heavily in debt. Credit cards, personal loans, a second mortgage his wife doesn't know about. His wife, my daughter." I stared at the documents. "How much does he owe?" Ben hesitated. "Best estimate? About $2.4 million. And his creditors are getting impatient. Some of them are not the kind of people you want to owe money to." I sat back in my chair. "So he married my daughter to get to my money." "It appears so," Ben said quietly. "I'm sorry, Harold." I was not sorry. I was furious. But fury is a young man's emotion. I was 67 years old. I had learned to channel my anger into something more useful. What else did you find? Ben pulled out another document. His brother, Craig. He's a lawyer, but he specializes in elder law, specifically guardianship and conservatorship cases. I felt a chill run down my spine. They're not just trying to steal my money, I said slowly. They're trying to take control of me. Ben nodded. I believe so. If they can get you declared mentally incompetent, they can become your legal guardians. They would have complete control over your assets, your medical decisions, everything. And Melissa? Ben hesitated again. I don't know. She might be part of it, or she might be a victim too. Derek is controlling, manipulative. It's possible she doesn't know the full extent of what her husband is planning. I looked at the folder, at the bank statements and legal documents and photographs of Derek meeting with men in expensive suits in dimly lit restaurants. So what do we do? I asked. Ben looked at me with those calm, steady eyes. We set a trap. The anniversary party was my idea. A grand celebration, 200 guests, the perfect setting for Derek to make his move. I knew he was desperate. His debts were coming due. His scheme was on the verge of collapse. He needed my money, and he needed it fast. I made it easy for him. In the weeks leading up to the party, I started acting confused. I forgot names. I repeated stories. I misplaced my car keys and found them in the refrigerator. I let Derek catch me staring blankly at financial documents, as if I could no longer understand them. Dad, Melissa said one evening, her voice thick with concern. Are you feeling okay? You seem distant lately. I'm fine, sweetheart, I said, patting her hand. Just tired, old age catching up with me. But I watched her exchange a look with Derek, a look that said this is working. Ben hired a private security firm to install hidden cameras in my house. We monitored Derek's phone calls, his emails, his meetings. We built a file so thick it could break a man's foot if you dropped it. And then, 3 days before the party, we caught him on camera. He was in my study, the one room he thought I never used. He was on the phone with Craig. Saturday night, Derek said, his voice low. The anniversary party. Harold will be emotional, off balance. I'll put the stuff in his drink during the toast. He'll start acting confused, slurring his words. By the end of the night, everyone there will have seen him having a public breakdown. I watched the footage with Ben, my hands clenched into fists. Then what? Craig's voice came through the speakerphone. We need to move fast. I've already got the paperwork ready, Derek said. Emergency guardianship petition. I'll file it Monday morning. By Tuesday, we'll have control of his accounts. We can move the money before anyone knows what happened. And Melissa? Derek laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. She'll do whatever I tell her. She always does. Once the old man is locked up in a memory care facility, she won't have anyone else. She'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Ben stopped the recording. That's enough, he said. We have him. I shook my head. Not yet. I want him to try it. I want him to think he's won, and then I want to watch his face when it all falls apart. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days after the party, Derek called me. Harold, his voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. It's about Melissa. She's very upset about what happened to Craig, and she's worried about you. We all are. Of course, I said, playing my part. Should I come to your house? Actually, Derek said, we were thinking we would come to you. Just a family meeting. Melissa, me, and a friend of ours. A doctor who specializes in cases like this. A doctor. Of course he had a doctor. Some corrupt physician who would rubber stamp whatever diagnosis Derek needed. I had seen this playbook before. Ben had showed me 6 cases where families had used exactly this technique to steal millions from elderly relatives. That sounds fine, Derek, I said, letting my voice waver slightly. I've been so confused lately. Maybe talking to a professional would help. Good, Derek said, and I could hear the triumph in his voice. We'll be there at 7. I hung up and immediately called Ben. They're coming tonight. 7 o'clock. They're bringing their fake doctor. We're ready, Ben said. My team is already in position. The cameras are rolling. The police are standing by. Good, I said. Let's finish this. They arrived at 7 sharp. Derek, Melissa, and a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and a bow tie. He introduced himself as Dr. Richard Hartley, a specialist in geriatric psychiatry. I knew his real name was Victor Sloan. His medical license had been revoked 5 years ago for falsifying patient records. Ben had dug up everything. "Harold, doctor," Hartley said, extending his hand. "Your family is very concerned about you. They've asked me to have a conversation, just to see how you're doing." I shook his hand weakly. "I don't understand," I said, looking around with wide, frightened eyes. "Melissa, what's happening? Who is this man?" Melissa was crying. "It's okay, Dad. He's here to help. We're all here to help." Derek guided me to my own living room couch like I was a confused child. "Just sit down, Harold. Everything is going to be fine." I sat. I let my hands tremble. I let my voice shake. "I don't understand. I don't understand what's happening." Dr. Hartley sat across from me, his expression full of practiced concern. "Harold, your family tells me you've been experiencing some confusion lately. Forgetting things, getting lost, having difficulty managing your affairs." I shook my head. "I don't think so. I feel fine. I just get tired sometimes." "That's very common," Hartley said smoothly. "Denial is often the first sign of a deeper problem. Your family loves you, Harold. They want to make sure you're safe." "Safe?" Derek stepped forward. "Dad, we've been talking to some people. Doctors, lawyers. We think it might be time for you to consider stepping back from managing your finances. Let someone else handle the stress. Someone who can look out for your best interests." There it was. The pitch. The con. The moment they had been building toward for months. "I don't," I stammered, looking from face to face. "I don't know. This is all so sudden." "It's not sudden," Derek said, his voice hardening slightly. "We've been seeing the signs for months. The confusion, the paranoia. And now, what happened to Craig at the party?" "What about Craig?" Derek's eyes locked onto mine. "Someone drugged him, Harold. Someone put something in his drink, and now I'm starting to wonder if maybe, in your confused state, you might have done something you don't remember." The room went silent. Melissa gasped. "Derek," she whispered, "you can't possibly think—" "I'm not accusing anyone," Derek said, holding up his hands. "I'm just saying that Harold clearly needs help. He needs to be somewhere safe, where he can't hurt himself or anyone else." I stood up, letting my body shake with manufactured fear. "You're trying to put me away," I said. "You're trying to take my money and lock me up in some home." "Harold," Hartley said, standing up and approaching me. "No one is trying to hurt you. We're trying to help you. Just sign these papers, and we can get you the care you need." He produced a folder from his briefcase. Guardianship documents, power of attorney, consent forms for admission to a psychiatric facility. I stared at the papers. "I won't," I whispered. "I won't sign anything." Derek stepped closer. His mask of concern was slipping, replaced by something harder, colder. "You don't have a choice, old man," he said quietly. So quietly that only I could hear. "You're going to sign these papers, or I'm going to call the police and tell them you drugged my brother. Your fingerprints were all over that table. Who do you think they're going to believe? A successful financial advisor, or a senile old man who can't remember where he put his car keys?" I looked into his eyes, and for the first time all night, I let the mask drop. "That," I said, my voice suddenly clear and strong, "is an excellent question." Derek froze. "Ben," I called out, "did you get all of that?" The door to my study opened. Ben Holloway walked out, holding a tablet with a glowing screen. Behind him came 2 plainclothes police officers and a man with a professional video camera, its red recording light blinking steadily. Derek's face went white. "What?" he stammered. "What is this?" "This," Ben said calmly, "is a recording of you attempting to fraudulently commit a mentally competent elderly person to a psychiatric facility. It's also a recording of you admitting to a conspiracy to steal his assets and threatening to frame him for a crime you committed." "I didn't," Derek started. "You did," I said, stepping toward him. "Every word, every threat, all of it recorded, in my house, with my consent." The officers moved forward. "Derek Mercer," one of them said. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted elder abuse, and assault with a controlled substance." "Assault?" Derek's voice cracked. "I didn't assault anyone. Craig was an accident. The drug was meant for—" He stopped. But it was too late. "Meant for who?" the officer asked. "Meant for Mr. Brennan here? The man whose drink you drugged at the party? The drink that somehow ended up in front of your brother?" Derek had no answer. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The officers handcuffed him. They handcuffed Dr. Hartley, whose real name was Victor Sloan. They were leading them toward the door when Melissa finally found her voice. "Derek," she screamed, pulling at the officer's arms. "Derek, tell them you didn't do this. Tell them it's a mistake." He did not even look at her. "Get off me," he snarled, shaking her off. "This is your fault. Your pathetic, useless family. If you had just convinced him to sign over the money months ago, none of this would have happened." Melissa staggered backward as if she had been slapped, and then Ben played the final card. "Mrs. Mercer," he said gently, "there's something else you need to see." He tapped the tablet screen. The living room's large television flickered to life. It was footage from 3 weeks ago, hidden camera footage from Derek's home office. Derek was on the phone, laughing. "Melissa is clueless," he was saying. "She actually thinks I love her. Can you believe it? 6 years of pretending to care about her boring little life, her boring little father. But once we get the old man's money, I'm done. I'm filing for divorce the second the funds clear. I'll give her a few $100,000 to keep her quiet, and then I'm gone. Costa Rica? Maybe. Somewhere with no extradition treaty." The video ended. The silence that followed was absolute. Melissa was standing in the middle of my living room, her face pale, her body trembling. She was staring at the blank television screen, as if she could still see her husband's laughing face. "He never loved me," she whispered. "It was all a lie. Everything was a lie." I walked to my daughter and put my arms around her. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said. "I'm so sorry you had to see that." She collapsed against me, sobbing. "I didn't know, Dad. I swear I didn't know. He told me he was worried about you. He said you were getting confused, that you needed help. I believed him. I believed everything he said." "I know," I said, holding her tight. "I know." The officers took Derek and Sloan away. Ben and his team packed up their equipment, and I sat with my daughter on the couch, holding her hand as she cried for the life she thought she had, the husband she thought she knew. It was 3 a.m. before she finally fell asleep. The trials came 6 months later. Derek's case was straightforward. The video evidence was irrefutable. His own words, recorded in his own home and mine, condemned him more completely than any prosecutor ever could. He was convicted of conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted false imprisonment, and assault with a controlled substance. The judge gave him 12 years. Victor Sloan pleaded guilty in exchange for testimony against Derek. He got 4 years. Craig Mercer, Derek's brother, was a more complicated case. He claimed he had no knowledge of the drugging, that he was just there to provide legal advice. But Ben had uncovered emails between the brothers, discussing guardianship strategies, discussing how to make me appear incompetent, discussing which psychiatric facility would be most isolated and most expensive. The jury did not believe his protestations of innocence. He got 8 years for conspiracy. I was in the courtroom for every verdict. I watched Derek's face when the foreman said guilty. I watched the arrogance drain out of him, replaced by something small and desperate. He looked at me as they led him away in handcuffs. His eyes were full of hatred. I just smiled. Not because I was happy. There was no happiness in any of this. My daughter's marriage was destroyed. My son-in-law was going to prison. My family was shattered. But there was something else, something that felt, after all those months of pretending to be weak, like justice. Melissa did not recover easily. How could she? She had spent 6 years married to a con man, believing every lie he told her, doubting her own father because her husband whispered poison in her ear. She moved back into my house for a while. We did not talk much at first. There was too much pain, too much shame, too much guilt. She spent most of her time in her old room, the room she had grown up in, surrounded by remnants of the girl she used to be. But slowly, gradually, she started to come back. She got a job at a local architecture firm, using the degree she had abandoned when Derek convinced her she did not need to work. She started running again, something she had loved before Derek told her it was a waste of time. She started laughing again. Real laughs, not the nervous, performative laughs she had been giving for years. One evening, about 8 months after the trials ended, she came to me in my study. "Dad," she said, "I need to tell you something." I put down my book. She sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "I knew," she said quietly. "Part of me knew. Not about the drugging, not about the Ponzi scheme, but I knew something was wrong. I knew Derek wasn't the man he pretended to be. I felt it in my gut, every day, for years." "Why didn't you say something?" I asked gently. "Because I was afraid," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was afraid that if I admitted the truth, I would have to face the fact that I had wasted my life, that I had married a monster, that I had betrayed you for someone who didn't even love me." I reached across and took her hand. "You didn't betray me, sweetheart." "I did," she insisted. "I believed him over you. I doubted you. I let him convince me that you were losing your mind, and I didn't even question it. I was so desperate to believe that my marriage was real that I was willing to sacrifice my own father." I squeezed her hand. "But you're here now," I said. "That's what matters. You're here, and you're healing, and you're finding your way back to yourself. That's all I ever wanted." She looked at me with those eyes, Margaret's eyes, full of pain and hope, and something that might have been the beginning of forgiveness. "How can you not hate me?" she whispered. I smiled. "Because you're my daughter, because I love you, because I know that the woman Derek tried to turn you into is not who you really are." She started crying harder then, but they were different tears, cleansing tears. I held her for a long time. I did not retire. That was the strange part. After everything that happened, after the trials and the healing and the slow rebuilding of my family, I found that I could not simply sit still. The 38 million was still in my account. It felt heavy now, tainted by everything that had happened. I did not want to just invest it and watch it grow. I wanted it to mean something. Ben and I talked about it over lunch one day. "What do you want to do with the rest of your life?" he asked. I thought about it for a long moment. "I want to help people," I said. "People like me. Old men and women who are being targeted by their own families. People who don't have the resources to fight back." Ben nodded slowly. "We could start a foundation. Legal defense. Investigation services. The whole package." I looked at him. "You would do that? Give up your practice to run a nonprofit?" Ben smiled. "Harold, I've spent 30 years helping rich people get richer. Maybe it's time I did something that actually matters." So we did it. We incorporated the Brennan Foundation 6 months later. We hired a staff of young, hungry lawyers and a team of investigators who specialized in financial crimes. We set up a hotline for elderly people who suspected they were being exploited by family members. The calls started coming almost immediately. A woman in Florida whose son was trying to get her committed to steal her pension. A man in Arizona whose daughter-in-law was slowly poisoning him with his own medication. A couple in Minnesota whose nephew had already stolen $200,000 and was coming back for more. We helped them all. It wasn't glamorous work. It wasn't the kind of thing that makes headlines. But every time we stopped a predator, every time we put a con artist in prison, every time we gave a frightened old person their life back, I thought about what Derek had tried to do to me, and I smiled. Melissa works at the foundation now. She started as a volunteer, answering phones and organizing files, but she had a gift for it. She understood, better than anyone, how these predators operated. She could spot the patterns, the manipulation tactics, the lies that sounded so much like love. Now she's our director of victim services. She sits with the families, holds their hands, tells them her own story. She shows them that it's possible to survive this, that it's possible to come out the other side stronger than you were before. I'm proud of her. Prouder than I've ever been. Last week, I was sitting in my office at the foundation, reviewing case files, when Melissa knocked on the door. "Dad," she said, "there's someone here to see you." She stepped aside, and a young man walked in. He was in his 20s, nervous, clutching a folder to his chest. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "my name is Jason. My grandmother is in trouble. Her new boyfriend is trying to take everything she has. The family lawyer says there's nothing we can do, but I heard about your foundation, and I thought maybe you could help." I looked at this young man, this grandson, who loved his grandmother enough to fight for her. I thought about Derek, about the trial, about the look on his face when the guilty verdict came in. I thought about Melissa, about how far she had come, about the woman she was becoming. And I thought about Margaret, who had always believed that the measure of a life was not what you built for yourself, but what you built for others. "Sit down, Jason," I said. "Tell me everything." He sat. He talked. I listened. And when he was finished, I picked up the phone and called Ben. "We have a new case," I said. "Get the team together." I hung up and looked at Jason. "We're going to help your grandmother," I said. "That's a promise." He started to cry. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you so much." I shook my head. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when she's safe." He nodded, wiping his eyes. I walked him to the door, and as I watched him leave, I thought about what Derek had said to me that night in my living room. "Who do you think they're going to believe? A successful financial advisor or a senile old man?" I smiled. They believed the senile old man, Derek. They believed every word. And that, I suppose, is the lesson. Never underestimate an old man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Never assume that gray hair means a weak mind. Never mistake kindness for weakness or patience for surrender. Because the moment you do, the moment you let your guard down, that's when the trap springs shut. And by then, it's far too late. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Harold Brennan. I'm 68 years old now. I run a foundation that helps people like me. And every single day, I wake up grateful for the life I still have. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Was my trap justified? Did Derek get what he deserved? And if you have a story of your own, a story about someone who tried to take advantage of you or someone you love, reach out. Maybe we can help. Until next time, remember, the wolves are always watching, but so are we.